The torn shirt revealed a tattoo that made the entire 200-person camp fall silent, because that mark had only been given to one person, and that person was supposed to have died 8 years ago. At NATO's elite training facility in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, at 06:47 a.m., the sun was just cresting the horizon when Sergeant Olivia Mitchell's morning started in the worst possible way. Climbing out of a beat-up Ford F-150, her Army-issue boots had come untied. Her rucksack was held together with patches and duct tape. In a faded gray Army t-shirt and worn tactical pants, she looked less like an elite trainee and more like someone who'd taken a wrong turn on their way to a homeless shelter. "Out of my way. Supply." Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison's voice cut through the morning air. The 6'5" giant shouldered past Olivia, nearly knocking her to the ground. She stumbled, but didn't fall, just quietly regained her balance and kept walking toward the barracks. The laughter that followed was the familiar sound of every military compound where egos run wild. Specialist Madison Carter, with her perfect regulation bun and parade ground posture, flipped her blonde hair and gestured at Olivia's outfit. Seriously, who let the janitor in? "This isn't a soup kitchen." Olivia said nothing. She picked up her rucksack with careful, precise movements and walked toward the barracks. Her silence only made them laugh harder, but in exactly 18 minutes, when that torn shirt revealed what was hidden beneath, every single person in that yard would understand they'd made the biggest mistake of their military careers. Hey folks, if this story of hidden strength and military justice already has you hooked, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, what happens in the next few minutes will remind you that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one everyone underestimates. Your support helps me bring you more incredible true stories like this one. Now, let's get back to that training yard where everything was about to change. Captain Marcus, Harrow, a mountain of a man with shoulders that looked carved from granite and a voice that could stop a riot, paced in front of the formation. His eyes landed on Olivia and stayed there. "You," he barked, pointing directly at her. "What's your deal? Motor pool send you to the wrong building?" The group snickered. Madison whispered to the soldier next to her, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Bet she's here to check a diversity box. Female quota, right?" Olivia didn't blink. She looked at Captain Harrow, her face calm as still water. "I'm a trainee, sir," Harrow snorted, waving her off like an annoying fly. "Get in line, then. Don't slow us down." That first evening, Chow was a battlefield of egos and testosterone. Olivia carried her tray to a corner table away from the loud, competitive storytelling. The room buzzed with recruits swapping tales of their accomplishments, voices growing louder as they tried to one-up each other. Corporal Derek Rodriguez, lean, cocky with a high and tight that screamed attitude, spotted her sitting alone. He grabbed his tray and strutted over, dropping it on her table with a deliberate clatter that made nearby tables turn to watch. "Yo, lost girl," he said, voice pitched to carry across the room. "This ain't a charity kitchen. You sure you're not here to wash dishes?" The group behind him erupted in laughter. Olivia paused, fork halfway to her mouth, and looked at him with steady brown eyes. "I'm eating." Derek leaned in, smirking. "Yeah, well, eat faster. You're taking up space real soldiers need." Without warning, he flicked her tray, sending mashed potatoes splattering across her shirt. The room howled with laughter. Cell phones came out, recording the humiliation for Instagram and TikTok glory, but Olivia just reached for her napkin, wiped the mess with slow, methodical movements, and took another bite like Derek wasn't even there. That deliberate calm seemed to infuriate him more than any comeback could have. The next morning's PT test was designed to separate the wheat from the chaff. Push-ups until arms shook, sprints that burned lungs, burpees in the North Carolina dirt under a blazing sun. Olivia kept pace, breathing steady and controlled, but her bootlaces kept coming loose. They were old, frayed, barely holding her boots together. During a sprint, Jake jogged up beside her. Jake was the group's golden boy, broad-shouldered with a grin that said he'd never lost at anything in his life and didn't plan to start now. "Yo, thrift store," he called out loud enough for the whole formation to hear. "Eeking, your boots given up, or is that just you?" Laughter rippled through the group like a wave. Olivia didn't respond. She simply knelt, retied her laces with quick, precise fingers, and stood. But as she did, Jake bumped her shoulder hard enough to send her stumbling. Her hands hit the mud, knees sinking into the wet earth. The group howled with delight. "What's that, Mitchell?" Jake said, his voice dripping with false concern. "You signing up to mop floors or just planning to be our personal punching bag?" Olivia got up, wiped her muddy palms on her pants, and resumed running without a word. The laughter followed her for the rest of the morning. The afternoon rifle disassembly drill would change everything. Every trainee had exactly 2 minutes to completely disassemble an M4 carbine, clean it thoroughly, and reassemble it to military specifications. Most struggled. Jake finished in a messy 143, grinning like he'd just aced finals. Madison scraped by at 159, hands shaking as she snapped the last piece into place. Then Olivia stepped up to the table. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. Her hands moved like they were following a script written in muscle memory. Pin out. Bolt carrier group. Parts laid out in a perfect grid with surgical precision. 8 seconds. Not a single mistake. Not a moment's hesitation. Sergeant First Class Mike Kowalski, the grizzled instructor overseeing the drill, stared at the timer, then at her. Then back at the timer like it might be lying. "Mitchell," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "Where'd you learn to do that?" Olivia wiped her hands on her pants and stepped back. "Practice, Sergeant." The training monitor behind them replayed her performance in slow motion. Every movement clean, efficient. Not a single wasted motion. A lieutenant nearby leaned over to Sergeant Kowalski, voice carrying just far enough for others to hear. Her hands didn't shake once. "That Special Forces steady." Jake overheard and scoffed loudly. "So she can clean a gun. Doesn't mean she can fight." But during the break that followed, a quiet trainee named Private First Class Elena Martinez, who'd been watching Olivia closely, slipped her a spare compass from her kit. "You'll need this," Elena whispered, eyes darting to make sure no one saw. Olivia took it, nodded once, and tucked it into her bag without a word. It was the first act of kindness she'd received since arriving. Though her expression didn't change, something flickered in her eyes. Whispers started after that rifle drill. A few trainees began glancing at her during breaks, trying to piece together this puzzle of a woman who dressed like a vagrant but handled weapons like Delta Force. Hand-to-hand combat training was designed to be the great equalizer. One-on-one matches, no weapons, no mercy. When the pairings were announced, fate, or cruel irony, matched Olivia against Jake Morrison, 6'5" of muscle, ego, and barely contained aggression. He towered over her small frame, fists already clenched, a predatory grin spreading across his face. Before the whistle even blew, Jake charged forward like a linebacker. He grabbed Olivia's collar with both hands and slammed her back against the padded wall of the training area. The impact was violent enough that her shirt tore, the fabric ripping from her shoulder. Partway down her back, for the first time since arriving at the facility, Olivia looked genuinely vulnerable, pinned against the wall by someone twice her size. The squad burst into cruel laughter. "Look at that," Madison jeered, phone out and recording. She's got tattoos, too. What is this, some kind of biker gang? But as Jake leaned in closer, face inches from hers, preparing to deliver what he thought would be the final humiliation, something in Olivia's eyes made him pause. There was no fear there. No panic, just cold, calculating patience. "This isn't daycare, Mitchell," he snarled, trying to regain momentum. "This is a battlefield. Time to go home, little girl." Olivia looked directly into his eyes. Voice steady and quiet. "Let go." Jake laughed. But his grip loosened just slightly, whether from overconfidence or some subconscious recognition that he was making a terrible mistake. That small loosening was all Olivia needed. She stepped back. The torn shirt fell lower, and suddenly the entire training yard went silent. Etched across Olivia's shoulder blade in stark black ink was a tattoo unlike anything the trainees had ever seen. A coiled viper rendered in intricate detail, its body wrapped around a shattered human skull. The serpent's eyes were hollow voids, and its fangs dripped what looked like venom, or blood. But it wasn't just the craftsmanship that made everyone freeze. It was the symbol itself. The laughter died in throats. Phones stopped recording. Even Jake loosened his grip, his predatory grin fading as he stared at the mark on her skin. "What the hell is that supposed to be?" Madison's voice cracked slightly, the cruel confidence wavering. But Colonel David Patterson, who'd been observing training exercises from across the yard, stepped forward with movements sharp and deliberate. His weathered face had gone completely pale. His hands were trembling, actually trembling as he approached. "Who gave you the right to wear that mark?" he asked, voice shaking with something between reverence and terror. The entire training ground seemed to hold its breath. Even the instructors had stopped what they were doing, sensing something monumental was happening. Olivia stood there, back straight, despite Jake still gripping her torn shirt, the tattoo stark against her skin. She looked directly at the colonel, voice quiet but clear enough to carry across the silent yard. "I didn't ask for it," she said. "It was given to me by Ghost Viper himself. I trained under him for 6 years." The words hit the assembled crowd like a physical blow. Colonel Patterson froze completely, eyes widening in recognition and disbelief. Then, as if his body was moving without conscious thought, he straightened to attention and snapped his hand to his forehead in a perfect salute. The other officers stared, mouths agape. An aide nearby whispered urgently, "Sir, what are you doing?" But Patterson held the salute, voice filled with something approaching awe. No one bears that tattoo unless they're his final student. His only student. Jake stumbled backward, face draining of color. Madison's phone slipped from nerveless fingers clattering on the concrete. Derek looked like he was about to be sick. The name Ghost Viper was legend in military circles. Whispered stories of a unit that didn't officially exist. Missions that never happened. Operatives who vanished from records after completing impossible tasks. 5 years ago, the entire unit had been declared KIA in a classified operation, so secret most people weren't even sure it had actually occurred. Ghost. Viper himself was mythical, a trainer so elite that he supposedly selected only one student per decade, marking them with this tattoo as proof of their lethal capabilities. Most people assumed it was just another military urban legend. Looking at Colonel Patterson's reaction, it was clear the legend was very real. An aide leaned close to the colonel, voice urgent. "Sir, Ghost Viper was classified as—" "I know what he was classified as," Patterson cut him off sharply, never lowering his salute. "I also know what I'm looking at." Olivia acknowledged the salute with a slight nod, then gently but firmly removed Jake's hands from her shirt. The big man didn't resist. He seemed incapable of movement, staring at her like she'd transformed into something alien. "This is impossible," Madison whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Elena, who'd been watching from the sidelines, stepped forward with a knowing expression. "I wondered why you never fought back," she said quietly. "You weren't hiding because you were weak. You were hiding because you were dangerous." But Jake's pride wouldn't let him accept what he was seeing. The golden boy who'd never lost at anything, who'd built his entire identity on being the best, the strongest, the most elite, couldn't process that this small, quiet woman had just revealed herself to be something far beyond his understanding. "Bullshit," he snarled, voice rising with desperate anger. "I don't care what tattoo you've got or who you claim trained you. Prove it in a real fight." The other trainees looked at each other uncertainly. Even they could sense Jake was about to make a catastrophic mistake. Colonel Patterson finally lowered his salute, voice sharp with warning. "Son, I strongly advise you to—" "No," Jake interrupted, face red with humiliation and rage. "I'm not going to be intimidated by some ink and fancy stories. If she's so dangerous, let her prove it." He stepped back into fighting stance, fists raised, muscles coiled for violence. "Come on, Mitchell. Show us what the great ghost viper taught you." Olivia looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time since arriving at the base, something shifted in her expression. The careful blankness was replaced by something colder, more calculating. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried an edge that made everyone within earshot feel suddenly uncomfortable. "If that's what you want." She didn't bother fixing her torn shirt or adjusting her stance. She simply stood there, arms at her sides, looking almost bored as Jake circled her like a predator sizing up prey. He charged first, throwing a wild haymaker aimed at her face. Olivia moved just enough to let it whistle past her ear, not even flinching at the near miss. Jake followed up with a left hook, then a right cross, then a combination that should have overwhelmed her with pure aggression and reach advantage. But Olivia wasn't there when his fists arrived. She moved like water, flowing around his attacks with minimal effort. Her footwork so subtle it almost looked like she was standing still while Jake exhausted himself swinging at empty air. "Hit me already," Jake roared, face flushed with exertion and growing desperation. Olivia didn't respond. She let him tire himself out, his swings getting progressively sloppier, his breathing becoming ragged. She was studying him, learning his patterns, waiting for the perfect moment. When that moment came, it was over so quickly that most of the watching trainees missed it entirely. Jake threw another wild right hand, overextending himself in his frustration. Olivia stepped inside his guard, her arms sliding around his neck in what looked like an embrace. There was a brief moment where they seemed frozen together, like dancers caught mid-step. Then Jake's eyes rolled back and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Seconds from start to finish. No strikes thrown, no dramatic moves, just a perfectly executed sleeper. Hold that cut off blood flow to his brain with surgical precision. The training yard was absolutely silent except for the sound of Jake's body hitting the ground. Captain Harrow walked over, face unreadable as he looked down at Jake's unconscious form, then at Olivia, then at the assembled group of shell-shocked trainees. When he finally spoke, his voice carried across the yard with absolute authority. "Effective immediately," he announced. "Sergeant Olivia Mitchell is designated as an honorary instructor. You will learn from her. You will respect her. And you will follow her orders as you would mine." Olivia didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the promotion at all. She simply picked up her rucksack, pulled her torn shirt closed as best she could, and began walking toward the barracks. The trainees parted before her like she was carrying something contagious, eyes down, their earlier laughter completely forgotten. The transformation in the camp's atmosphere was immediate and profound. Within 48 hours, Jake Morrison was medically evaluated and discharged. Within a week. Madison Carter's sponsorship was pulled. She deleted her social media in tears. Derek Rodriguez was assigned to every unpleasant duty on base. Captain Harrow faced mandatory retraining. But Olivia, she vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. 5 days later, Major General Thomas Reed arrived at the main gate in civilian clothes, jeans, and a tactical jacket. When he met Olivia, her carefully controlled expression cracked for the first time. As they climbed into that beat-up Ford F-150, Colonel Patterson turned to the gathered crowd and announced, "This is Major General Thomas Reed, Olivia's husband." Madison actually staggered. Derek's mouth fell open. The truck roared to life and they drove away in a cloud of dust. 3 months later, a new recruit found a photograph tucked under Olivia's old bunk. It showed a younger version of her standing next to a man in black tactical gear. His face deliberately blurred. A fresh-faced private looked at it. Who was she, really? Elena, now in advanced training, answered with a thoughtful expression. She was exactly who she appeared to be. Someone who didn't need to prove herself to anyone. The question is whether we're smart enough to recognize that kind of strength when we see it again. The photo was passed from trainee to trainee. It became a talisman, a visual reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and somewhere far away, Olivia Mitchell received an encrypted phone call. Code Phoenix. She knew the past was coming back, but this time she wasn't alone.